guys, how you going? Hope you're all doing very well. This afternoon I'm going to be doing yet another movie review. This movie is a horror film from Italy, Italian language English subs, released in the year 2021, directed by Roberto De Feo and Paolo Stropoli, and this film is called A Classic Horror Story. So A Classic Horror Story opens up in a lonely stretch of highway in the rural lands of Italy. You've got a group of friends in a van who are having a great time, but when evening approaches, the driver swerves an obstacle on the road, crashes into a tree and breaks his leg severely as a result. So the rest of the friends are okay, but they need to desperately find help because he's bleeding out. So their mobile phones are out of range, everything that you'd expect from a classic horror story, so they decide to trek through the woods in order to find help. And they believe they've found help in a clearing where there is a lone house. So this house is quite spooky, but they don't think really anything of it. They're desperate for help. So they knock on the door, there's no answer, and one of the friends goes inside. And what they see inside really shouldn't have been seen, so they freak out and try to get back to the van, but no matter how much they navigate the woods, they always find themselves back at this clearing. So something freaky is going on, and so they seek refuge in the house in order to try and come up with a plan. But then to their horror, as each night approaches, there is something in the woods that is going to lay siege upon this house, and with each night, these attacks are getting more and more savage. And so this is a living nightmare that this group of friends are going to have to work together to get out of, and whether or not they can is something you're going to have to find out for yourself, because that's as far as I'm going with my synopsis. Now my thoughts on A Classic Horror Story. When it comes to Italian horror films, I'm not a massive fan. Modern Italian horror hasn't been very good, and classic Italian horror from Dario Argento is stuff that I really didn't gravitate to. I believe that Dario Argento is one of the most overrated directors of all time, and that's my opinion. If you disagree, feel free to bring forward your argument. But for me, I just never really liked the guy. I just thought he was very stylish, but it wasn't really anything else. And so for me to be a fan of a horror film, I just need a little bit more than just style. So when I heard that this movie from Italy was coming out, I thought, well, I don't really have too much of a desire to watch it. But what really enticed me to see the film was the fact that it has really split audiences down the middle. Some people really liked it and some people really didn't like it. So I thought, all right, well, these are the most interesting films. And the fact that it was a foreign horror film, I thought, well, even though it's Italian, why not give this a shot, and hopefully it would surprise me. And I will say, it actually did surprise me in a very pleasant way. This was actually a lot better than I was anticipating, and it was a lot of fun, but at the same time very serious, and it was actually quite scary in the serious approach that this movie has. So I'm not going to give anything away, but the best way I can sum this film up is that it is a homage from genuine horror fans. Roberto De Feo and Paolo Stropoli, they have been clearly inspired by horror films from each era, 70s, 80s, 90s and 2000s, and they've just brought it in as a collage. It's a collage of horror films where you can pinpoint exactly what the inspiration was, whether it's Blair Witch, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Hills Have Eyes, Midsummer. There are clear inspirations to this story that actually make you think of those movies from yesteryears. So it is a trip down memory lane. It's a nostalgic horror film, but it's also a horror film when it twists at the end that actually made it very scary, very creepy, and it's something that could actually really happen. And it does take on an urban legend that I'm not going to give away once again, but that urban legend is actually very creepy. And so when you realise that it's not plagiarising these classic horror films, it's in fact making it a lot of fun, and it just spins on its head, and it actually makes it its own horror film by the end. And so that's something I really appreciated, and I'm sure a lot of people out there are going to appreciate as well. A lot of people will say that this is a predictable horror film, but I don't think that's the case. I thought as though, yes, it is somewhat predictable, but the predictability is fun. Is that every now and then you get a horror film that just wants to emulate what made these specific filmmakers fans themselves. And so when you get these trip down memory lanes, I can forgive the predictability to some extent. But as I said, I didn't really see that twist coming right at the end. There are a few clues that the twist is coming, but you don't really see them. And so the second time you watch the film, you'll be able to determine those clues. But when I was watching it, I thought, oh, okay, well, that was actually quite decent. That was actually basically the homage to horror films, the homage to horror fans. And so you'll really appreciate it. If you've been a horror fan for a very long time, Roberto De Feo and Paolo Stropoli have created something that is nostalgic, but also a nice little icing on the cake by the time the movie completes. So it's a very disturbing film when you actually find out what's going on, and on the other hand, it's actually quite a fun film. And so the cinematography changes with each sort of vibe that the movie's trying to emulate. Whether it's Texas Chainsaw Massacre, it's very gritty and grimy. Whether it's Blair Witch that they're trying to emulate, it's very surreal. And so there are a whole lot of different sort of atmospheres and different worlds that just blend in together, and it works. And I just thought as though it was a really fun fun time. It's not a great horror film, it's not a serious horror film, but as I said, that really disturbing sort of aspect by the time you get to the end, I thought worked really well, and for me, I enjoyed it a lot more than I expected. I know a lot of people didn't like it. As I said, there are problems to the movie as far as predictability, but if you go into a movie that you just want to enjoy the nostalgia that this movie brings, then I definitely think this horror film is for you. So it's not perfect, but it's far from bad. I'm going to give a classic horror story 3 stars. Alright guys, that's it for my review. Hope you enjoyed it. Till next time, keep watching movies, and I'll see you later. Bye.